Okay, it looks like we are on the air, and let us get our clickety-clack material. Welcome to Evolution Hour on our dear little day, the wee hours of the morning on the 11th of August, 2025. TortucanWordPress.com. Remember, there's a delightful mess of material. Boop. Available there, freebie for everybody who desires such a thing. It's a nice brisk 86 degrees here and at midnight in Spokane. How delightful. Hopefully other areas are um, not any more uncomfortable than that might be, but unfortunately I suspect that is the case. So anyway, here we are in my little glass of iced tea. As usual, as you all know, we are continuing to plow through source by source the claims of titans. The dinosaur book from the young Earth creationists, Sarfati and Tay. Here, I suppose I should stick an illustration of this because it is going to be highly relevant. They're going on about soft tissue stuff, and our part 2 will be another Luskin episode, so that will be fun. But anyway, they put a chart up on their page, which is various claims casting doubt on some aspects of the soft tissue claims. And then, as you can see, there's a refuted by column. But what intrigued me was to look at the sources, because in only one case, hello, Lisa. Yes, it has been hot. In only one case, bless their little hearts, do they actually reference it in the main text, which means that all, including the creationist material, is who knows what the hell it is. They're saying K et al. 2008 or San Antonio et al. 2011, and there's no references in the material in that chapter to identify what the hell that is. So I've had to go on a little detective hunt to see which ones of these things are, and we'll be putting links up. Most all of them will be available open access, so we'll be able to get into it. But that opens a further can of worms as to what they're not dealing with. I'd noticed before that the 2014 paper on the iron issue from Schweitzer was not in their discussion, but lo and behold, here it shows up as a paper to be refuted. Quite patently obvious that there's no way in hell for anybody coming into this from a creationist perspective to be able to even try to fact check them, given the fact that they aren't supplying the material. So anyway, we'll fill in all their stuff. They only give one paper directly that they cite, Armitage and Anderson's 2013 thing on the soft tissue. These people don't read much, do they? Well, not even necessarily their own material. Hi, Brian. Superficial secondary scholarship is really indicative of the field, assuming, of course, that I'm able to track down the sources they're dealing with. A big chunk of them aren't about the topic that it's supposedly refuting, so it's very murky all the way up and down. Anyway, the Armitage and Anderson paper, of course, is the notorious wacky thing from 2013 about the Triceratops horn, of which there is every reason to believe it's not a Triceratops horn at all. It is not a dinosaur thing at all, but a bison latifrons from modern Cenozoic times. And the material and methods crap in the paper is so incompetent and vague that anybody's guess about this. Very sloppy. It's published in a more or less legit journal, but it's a peripheral journal and clearly not really in the wheelhouse of anybody making claims about paleontological material. It's not in Science or Nature or any of that stuff. Anyway, the funky part that I found amusing was that in the refuted by thing, they explicitly say that all of these refutations have appeared, quote, in the scientific literature, unquote. Well, that applies to some of the papers, the ones in Science and Nature and all that, PLOS One, that sort of thing. But certainly doesn't apply to the Society Quarterly or that branch. And that is probably what some of these sources are, as near as I can determine. So we'll go filing off on that. One is the issue that some of these soft tissue things might have been biofilm. And there was a 2008 paper that we'll be putting the links up to that will be going in on that. And it was refuted by a 2016 analysis from Mary Schweitzer, which I will be putting a link up to. And of course, the supposed refutation in the Armitage-Anderson paper, which we leave on the sidebar, although you can go looking into the things because I'll be putting a link up to it. Then there is an issue about whether there's biomineral adhesion. That one is suggested by a paper from 2011 by San Antonio. At least I think it's that one. Remember, they're not giving the actual citations for these things. So I've been looking into my own references because we are going to have an extensive section on the whole soft tissue crap in Rocks Were There Volume 2. So odds are we were encountering a lot of this stuff anyway. And it's supposedly refuted by a 2008 paper from Buckley et al., which raises some interesting questions because, of course, the 2011 paper is before the 2008 refutations, can't possibly be about, and it isn't technically about that paper as well because the chronology is all wrong. Then there is a cladial adsorption issue that's suggested by 2111 paper by Edwards. That's one I've only got the abstract for, so I'll be putting the link of that, the Royal Society. It's supposedly refuted by, quote, Thomas 2013, by which I'm sure they mean Brian Thomas. And judging from what I have in my reference field that came out of him in 2013, one is a thing from a creationist conference that we will be able to get the full link on. And then there's a comparable thing that he did for an anthology by Henry Morris III. But we'll be putting the link up to the one that was in the creation conference. So not in the standard scientific literature. Sorry. Then we get to the iron preservation issue of Mary Schweitzer et al. 2014, which we'll be putting a link up to. That is supposedly refuted by, drumroll, not one but two creationist papers, not technical literature in the standard science works. One is Damassa and Boudreau 2015, which Sarfati and Tay misspelled as Demassa with only one S, and only able to put the abstract of it at the Creation Research Society quarterly. And then there's a Kevin Anderson thing from 2015. Again, I'm assuming that that's what it is. That's all from the Creation Research Society quarterly. We can't be absolutely certain because our super duper careful Sarfati and Tay are not giving us enough information to be absolutely clear. Some people do more than one paper at a time. As I noted, Brian Thomas had two things on this in 1 year. So which one is it? You know, boop, boop, boop. Well, we got, hello, Vesta. Yeah. So we're just slamming down through the exciting world of Sarfati and Tay's really sloppy. The theme for this one is full smoke and no mirrors in their misrepresentation and shady dealings to try to downgrade the issues about not that soft tissue bits and pieces and fragments aren't being preserved. I think there's pretty well general agreement on that front, but what nature and how and what mechanisms and all the work that is accumulated over the past 20 years or so, which makes it abundantly clear that there are in fact natural mechanisms how little teeny fragments like this can in fact get preserved, and not just in dinosaurs. Quite a lot of the work Schweitzer's and their team were doing and related to turtles, not dinosaurs, although oddly enough that stuff doesn't get highlighted much by the creationists, maybe because turtles aren't as sexy as dinosaurs. I don't know. We don't know about that. Anyway, another one of their topics is the contamination issue, which was a legitimate one. And there's still some discussion about the extent to which some of this stuff is due to contaminated instrumentation and all that, because tiny amounts of stuff, since we're talking about microscopic material, boy, do you have to be super clean. There's a paper from 2017, which I'm guessing is the Buckley et al. Paper. I'll be putting a full link to that. And it's supposedly refuted by Thomas 2017. Once again, Brian Thomas, I have no clue. He wrote a few general posts on the subject at ICR and others, but I don't know of any more serious thing, and certainly nothing in a regular technical journal about it. Then a thing from 2018 by Wieman. That one's from Nature, which is a real enough paper. But if that's the one that Sarfati and Tay are referring to, it's not actually a criticism of Buckley et al. 2017. So it's just murky, wacky stuff that's going on. It's a further reliable material evidence about how sloppy creationists are at the source methods level, which of course then brings us to our latest installment of the ongoing search for nothing in the Luskin 800 plus article list. We're about 150 articles into the thing, and bless them, the vast majority of them are relatively recent papers, within the last 5 years or so. But not bless them, it's not really helping their case much. So this new one, I'm putting in a couple papers from 2020, Peng Zhang et al., which is on alternative splicing in human tissue transcriptions. And then this Pagliarini et al. 2020 on ALU-rich introns, how they promote circularization of mRNA. And it's extremely relevant what they say in their final paragraph, which I will be putting the whole quote up in our description. It is also interesting that almost half of the SAM68 bound short ultra-conserved motifs map to younger ALU elements, and they cite a source 42. Thus, SAM68, as well as other RBPs regulating the biogenesis of such circRNAs, may have only recently acquired new regulatory functions, since circRNAs accumulate in brain with aging, source 43, and their dysregulation possibly contributes to neurodegenerative diseases, source 44. Modulating their expression in the brain may have both physiological and pathological consequences. In other words, there's some theodicy can of worms and stuff that's opening up. So I looked up those 3 papers to find out whether any of them are ending up on the Luskin list, because they are, after all, directly about the theme topic that they're bringing up the Pagliarini paper. And surprise, surprise, nope. Ethiopian restaurant, very tasty food. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever had Ethiopian cuisine. I'm trying to think of whether there's been any spots where I bumped into some of the about the closest. Of course, it's the wrong continent, but at least on the other side of the Atlantic, I remember all the Brazilian South American grill thing that was in a hotel down in Las Vegas, and I think the restaurant still exists, but it's moved to a different hotel the last time I was down there. But as for a lot of the African cuisine, about the closest I can get to some of it is watching those recipe shows on, like the Great American Recipe and the like, where you have people from various cultural backgrounds, and they're bringing in the recipes that are the culture and the bouillon base of things, and some are from Asia, some from Africa, and it's really quite interesting about the different form of ingredients and spices and stuff that goes on, some of which have interactions with Ethiopia, of course, being just south of Egypt. You have a Arabic cultural frame that's a little different from what you're getting in the Central Africa part. So I like down in Ghana and that sort of thing. So I think that'd be rather interesting. Put in any food reviews you wish to have, Vesta, about what the experience was on it. Anyway, so we'll have most all of the papers we can get the full shebang on. Only one we won't be able to. I'll have to put an abstract in on it. The first, number 42, was Deininger 2011. And there was an interesting quote in that little puppy: because there is no specific mechanism for removal of ALU insertions, ALU evolution is dominated by the accumulation of new ALU inserts, which is the whole point about the fact that once you get these little things in our genome, they're proliferating, and eventually you have to deal with it if it's causing a malfunction potentially, or linking up parts of the DNA simply because they like to do their little plug-in Lego block trick. The genetic systems have to deal with it somehow, otherwise you're dead. So that's how that happens. Ethiopia is part of ancient Nubia. Interesting. Yeah, so you have a lot of very deep cultural shifts and things that pop along in a lot of it is off of the prehistory thing, because so many of the cultures fall back into a period when you don't have the written languages. And so all you're going off on is what you have available for archaeology as soon as you get really past the Bronze Age. And you start getting into more and more legendary notions and just the archaeological digs that people can get into. Then, of course, a lot of the regions in question, archaeology will have been slowed to a halt because of wars and genocides and squabbles back and forth in recent times, to where it's not safe to be able to go there. And so work that might be done, or as happened in Afghanistan, where nutballs come in charge and they blow the things to smithereens or vandalize stuff, as some of the ISIS people did in Iraq and that. So information distortion we disapprove of entirely. So yeah, it's Ethiopia. That was also the spot that Mussolini tried to conquer back in the 1930s. That's Haile Selassie's bunch. There's the Coptic branch of Christianity occupies that. Supposedly the Ark of the Covenants down there, according to a church down in Ethiopia. And so it's a little niche group that have a slightly different scriptural basis. So some of the texts and things that won't be popping up in some of the other Bibles pop up in the Coptic Bible. And so there's a lot of interesting sidebar stuff that goes on in this area, which often gets lost in the shuffle when everyone just kind of turns it into a ginormous cartoon. Anyway, so we've got that Deininger paper. Then there's a 2015 one from Rebecca Wolf, which delved into possible functions for some of those circular RNAs that are being promoted or dealt with in ALU-rich areas, including, quote, post-synaptic platforms as synaptic tags to keep a molecular memory, unquote. So all sorts of possibilities of how things connect up on this material. And then the Kumar et al. 2017 paper, that's note 44. Alas, I got to just do the abstract on that one. It isn't an open access paper, but at least you'll be able to kind of look at the preliminary elements of it. So it's intriguing that how often it is that when a topic that they're bringing up has follow-up material, which would seem right up their alley to explore, if it's not really helping the argument, whoop, it's not on their scope, and they just remove it. This is one of the nice little advantages of doing text search and stuff on things, because that big file that I'm going through for that big list is in a doc file, so I can do text searches to find coordinated things. Some of the episodes that I've done previously, in fact, have been on that very structure, where a particular topic or a particular author is popping up, and I'm looking to see what else has been done by that, and that produces a daisy chain of papers from the same group. So I think if I did a master catalog, there's probably way fewer actual authors involved in most all of the papers they're dealing with. They're often various members of a lot of the same teams that are doing multiple research over multiple years, trying to figure out what stuff is going on. And so fine and dandy, but it's interesting to note the names that aren't on them. None of the people from the intelligent design community. In fact, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody in the creationist community that's involved in the thing. So it's quite an intriguing little mess. And then, of course, I've also been following very large platters of food using rolled flatbread to pick up food. Yeah, that is interesting ways of handling that. And I've always had kind of a soft spot for unleavened bread that a lot of cultures play off of. And of course, it pops up in the Israel condition with the Passover and all that. There's lavash and various other things that have that. I think it has an interesting little cracker quality that's different from the more processed forms of wheat that tend to end up in other cultures. And then, of course, all the various ingredients and which ones, whether or not they're eating pork or not, and beef and vegetarian elements and the different spices. I know plantains play a rather significant role in a lot of African cuisine and some of the other stuff. So anyway, we digress. Pita, there we go. So it's there's a lot of fun little stuff following. Milo Rossi is doing a series on this just screwball guy on, I think, TikTok, that he has a big influencer that is just absolutely screwball, and he channels material that relates to Kent Hovind and a lot of other stuff. And then, of course, you're getting all the little sidebar cross connections as Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk and others are jousting over who's going to be more extreme and who is a federal agent or not, as people are trying to joust around and get positions jockeying in Trump 2.0. But remember, they may only have a few months left for their day in the sun, because I'm very interested in seeing that if my prophecy is correct, and this is 1929, kids, how many of these influencers are going to find their revenue stream drying up like the Duesenberg company back in 1937, to where no longer can the economy sustain useless. I mean, Duesenbergs at least were really great cars, but they were fabulously expensive, and there weren't enough wealthy people around to keep the revenue stream going. So Duesenberg went out of business. Pierce Arrow went out of business. So there was a tremendous attrition of some of the big top maker luxury cars in the early and mid 1930s on that. Yes, he's not well. Yeah, yeah. For those also who have been following the cottage industry of Donald Trump's ongoing dementia, that his ramblings, his fascination with stuff, it's probably no coincidence that he's going full bore to build his Golden Palace ballroom there next to the White House, because this was an obsession of his going back to the Clinton administration. And as his brain spirals back in time, and remember, building fancy schmancy things with a lot of glitzy gold is a comfort place for him. He hallucinates that he has taste. I saw a clip of somebody that was comparing what the one of the little meeting rooms there in the White House, where Joe Biden was sitting in functionally the same chair as Donald Trump is, so that you could see how he's golded up the place compared to the operation in Biden's thing. And it's just like a vomit of gold claptrap, little filigrees and fuss potties all over the place, and gold pots everywhere and gold frames everywhere. Trump is single-minded. I wish somebody could give him Midas touch so that everything that he touches turns to gold, so he starves to death, like King Midas did in the mythology. But admittedly, there's more built-in taste in the White House, that there's only so much he can do to screw it up, as opposed to his living room there in Trump Tower, which is just claptrap par excellence. Blech, blech. Yikes. A very dark, thin bread, almost purple in color. Yeah, just be curious to see what materials, and whether it's the dark coloration is from spices, or how it's prepared, what kind of details on that, being not a sufficient enough cook to be able to give a historical analysis on that. I will leave it to other people to deal with. Let me put my thank you note up so that I do not forget the fact that there are some people out there who actually think what I'm doing is worthwhile enough that they can actually shell out a little bit of scratch to help out on the monthly shtick. And I am grateful for all of our colleagues and researchers and researchers and friends and all the legacy patrons over the years. And again, I am well aware of the fact that in the gloomy economic times to come, it's entirely possible that some additional people will have to go from active status down into the legacy patrons. And bear in mind that everybody should be super duper careful to make sure that your finances are stable. Dapper Dino does exactly when he's talking about people who become patrons, or his efforts. Admittedly, a lot of these people are actually generating their livelihood now from the YouTube royalties and the like. I am not monetized, so there's no commercials popping up in any of these things, which I always find very intriguing, because an awful lot to see a Milo Rossi or Apologia thing running along, and then suddenly the commercial for the Ark Encounter or PragerU appears, when these are diametrically opposed to the attitudes of the people whose videos they're interrupting. The one advantage of being down so far on the totem pole is no commercials here, and therefore no chance of seeing a PragerU ad interrupting my dulcet tones here. So, well, as I said, it's a matter of, on donating, it's a matter of tight finances, and everybody has to make do on the thing. But I'm scraping along 1 week, 1 month at a time. And as you can see, I'm keeping busy. The power is on. I have ice cubes and iced tea, so I can survive in that realm. And the next big expense functionally here is to get up enough scratch and stuff to make sure that I can get more fuel oil into the furnace tank so that we can handle things as we move into the wintertime and that. We're got the fans on and here and pumping air up from the basement and all that from the heats. We're supposed to be in the 90s again through most of this weekend and into next week, and we're oscillating up and down. So do as we can, but at least the advantage is Spokane has relatively low humidity. We're continuing on things where I'm still scrambling along and tidying up all my material for the cosmology chapter. Little dangling loose ends to plug in on stuff. I still got to get all the solar system planetary asteroid material straightened out. In fact, some little sidebar, it turns out that you wouldn't normally think that Standing for Truth's little show on hydroplate theory would actually be relevant primarily to a discussion of comet formation. But in fact, in that wacky Walt Brown world, they think that all sorts of cataclysmic things are happening in the solar system, along with the stupid hydroplates zinging around and entire mountain ranges being thrown up like in one day. Oh, sure. Okay. So I still got to go through a couple more hours of the silly thing. It runs on for over 4 hours. Dumpy has treated your country terribly. We all, everybody in the place has to, in Europe and our various allies have to kind of hold their nose and maneuver while Trump screws everything up. In the long run, it's going to accelerate the process, which was inevitable anyway, because we're only like 350 million people. That as the rest of the world develops and industrializes and figures out how to do stuff, we become comparatively less critical. But Trump has vastly accelerated how marginalized we are going to be on so many fronts within the next 5 or 10 years. And we can all blame the nincompoop business fraud and the 77 million people who voted for him, and every single one of the idiot Trumpista senators who confirmed these numbskulls to the cabinet, from RFK Jr. and Lutnick and Hegseth and Kash Patel and all the rest. I mean, has there ever been as brain dead a bunch of suck-up, sycophant, spineless jellyfish as the current Republican Party? Not that I'm aware of. My God, even the Republicans back in Nixon's days had more stamina and uncertainty and not willing to swallow everything Tricky Dick was telling them. Not so here. So it's pathetic to see the Republican Party end up in such a death throes. But we'll see what happens if the economy collapses and Trump building his golden ballroom at the same time that millions of people are unemployed and there are food shortages. It's not good optics. So we'll find out. It's like living above a meth lab. Yeah, it's we warned you this was coming, kids. Don't blame me. I voted for Harris. Everything about it is pathetic and revolting, but none of it's surprising. So anyway, this Standing for Truth video that proved to be more interesting than I was expecting, because I knew it was going to be about hydroplate theory, which is so marginal that the standard creationists, the catastrophic plate tectonics crowd and all that, just pay no attention whatsoever to hydroplates. It's a dead letter in standard creationism. So they had to trawl around to some little fellow, Lauer, and there's a pastor that is doing the other part of the show, that are so far down the food chain, I've never even heard of them before. Anyway, the guy's just going on and on and on, just repeating tropes. They got little charts that he's copied from Walt Brown, and he's repeating things. And so this actually is bumping into supposed predictions that Walt Brown is making that are supposedly successfully made. And this actually is tripping over. Occasionally, he's bringing up actual science topics. No direct referencing of the science material, but the science topics, like a particular comet or whatever, that opens up the doodad. So it turns out that most of what's going on in that stupid video will actually be alluded to in relation to asteroid and comet formation rather than the flood per se. The area that I got to watch, hydroplate theory. Yes, hydroplates are this idea that Walt Brown came up with, that basically kind of what we think of as the conventional plate tectonic mode slide along in the water like on a grease slippy slide because of all the water squishing up from the fountains of the deep and all of that during the flood. So land masses are moving around really fast and slamming together really fast. So literally, for all practical purposes, as the guy Lauer was saying, all the Earth's mountain ranges that we know of, I suppose you'd have to go through the Cascades, but the Andes and the Rockies and the Himalayas and all of these Ural Mountains are all being thrown up in maybe only a day, mind you, not, or maybe a week at most, in the flood cataclysm. Well, golly gosh, that raises the heat problem, don't it? And trying to squish that much stuff into too short of a time. And so what I'm waiting to see, and the reason why I got to watch through the whole bloody thing, just for, will the heat topic get brought up? Will Lauer bring it up on his own? And or will little Donnie Budinsky bring it up because we know he knows about it, because Erica Gutsick-Gibbon has been banging him in the balls on it now for a couple years. So there's no doubt whatsoever that he knows that this is an issue. And will he bring it up consciously? If he doesn't, will somebody in the Q&A bring it up or not? So there's the daisy chain that I got to go through. And that means sitting through the whole bloody hours of the thing. And it is boring as hell most of the time. Although once in a while, like I was discovering, I've trimmed into, like stuff that he has. My favorite has to be prediction number 51. Planet X will not be found in the next 5 years by January 2021 because it does not exist, unquote. And this is a 2016 prediction, which I'm going, wait a minute, by 2016 was like anybody really expecting? No, indeed, that is different from catastrophic plate tectonics. Yeah, that's more or less staying with standard plate tectonic theory, but still speeding things up a lot. There's a lickety-split roller coaster absurdity to the scale of what's going on in his hydroplates. And this quickly got dumped on by a lava creationist over years to the point of where it's a dead letter. Now, Lauer and company are all grumpy cat because they're insisting that, well, nobody will come on to argue with us about this from the standard creationist community that defends catastrophic plate tectonics, which I suppose you could argue is a legitimate complaint for them to make, or that they consider you so effing stupid that even by their own standards, you ain't worth the time of day. So anyway, this little bit about the Planet X is that it was like a dead letter in 2016 as they had worked out the dynamics of, was there much big, there could theoretically be small Pluto-sized things out farther out, and they may or may not be discernible by being perturbing the Oort cloud and things like that. But any really substantial chunk that's far out doesn't seem to have a support, and very few people are really looking for that anymore. And therefore, Brown is making a prediction decades after the thing is irrelevant. And so what kind of a prediction is it? It's like me predicting that, good gravy, I predict that 8-track tapes will not be recorded in Dolby Digital. Goody gumdrops. Nobody's doing 8-track tapes, and so nobody needs to worry about recording them in Dolby Digital or anything else. They're extinct. And so we're getting to the point where DVDs and the like, so many people are apparently streaming these days, although I like to have my hard copy of things, and I prefer and secondary audio commentaries and all that kind of stuff, which you don't get when you're doing streaming stuff. So it's a narrower world that some people are dealing with, and we'll find out what happens. And we must be the keepers of the flame of interesting actual reality as things cringe around us and buckle under the mess that we are, I suspect, going to be happening. And then a lot of this can be redressed with fairly great speed. Remember although to be fair, you could argue that the advent of FDR in 1933, it was really like 7 years, and the full military defense thing preparing for World War II that kind of really pulled us out of the Depression. Well, that's a 7-year time frame. And maybe processes we're going to be sped up even more. So it will be interesting to see what happens in 26, 27, 28, assuming, of course, our little nutballs are unsuccessful in gerrymandering the thing so they can keep the majority by rearranging the number of seats, or by declaring martial law and eliminating elections, or who knows what else little tricks they may try to do. So we have an awful lot of overly exciting things to happen. However, I think the dynamic mix between the Epstein mess and a potential economic collapse and high inflation all happening simultaneously, and that's not even counting whether or not we get a pandemic or two with RFK Jr. and the crazy train people, all of the anti-vaxxers that are circulating around in there, and how they've just gutted so many different policy advisory groups. I'm in Washington State. We have our own state experts and the like, and it's highly likely that an awful lot of states will have to just pay no attention to FDA. And they will be just, obviously, you won't be able to pay attention to any statistics coming out of the Trump administration, because if they don't like the numbers, they just fire the person doing the statistics, and they'll presumably put in some clown who does kind of operates like doing the books at the Trump company. Remember, Trump was literally convicted for cooking the books to conceal information about tax paying, and that all came out in his prior conviction as a convicted felon. Plus what we know about his shady dealings that were going on back in the 1980s and all that. So don't blame me. I knew about this stuff. How many Trump voters know about this stuff? I suspect the vast majority of them don't. So yeah, the catastrophic plate tectonics thing is a separate thing from hydroplates. And then you've got similar little niche groups in the cosmology issue, which we'll be discussing in volume 2 of the Rocks Were There, in relation to the various dodges. Virtually all of it crystallizes around the day 4 problem of how the hell can you see distant starlight? And it's most all creationists have bit the bullet and admitted the universe is really big. And they're not attempting to argue that Andromeda Galaxy is not 2.5 million light years away. But since they got the speed of light thing to deal with, how come we can see it if the universe is only 6,000 years old? So there's a whole bunch of little dodges that keep people come up with. They comport the universe around to keep time going one speed there and somewhere else out farther. So billions of years can go on out in Andromeda Galaxy, and somehow or other only 6,000 of it's actually happened. So all of that happened lickety split elsewhere. That's some of the models that they do. It's just hilarious. And you can see it ought to be a law that felons can't run for office. I think that's entirely appropriate. And we may have to have a constitutional amendment on that front. And if enough progressives get in charge of enough states, gee whiz, that can happen. And along with that, we can overturn Citizens United. We can codify Roe v. Wade. We can do a whole bunch of things. We can revise the Second Amendment. There's all sorts of little amendments that we can do. Plus, add a few more states, reapportion things so that have representatives in large Congress, so that the representatives represent fewer people, more like what it used to be earlier times, so we have more people in Congress. And instead of, we can add a wing on to make a bigger Congress rather than worrying about the ginormous golden ballroom, which will need to be redecorated in a subsequent president. I don't think anybody could stomach that perpetual gold filigree claptrap that Trump thinks is tasteful. So it's going to be a fun and games thing going on to see who's all around and what shit hits what fans and how many equivalents of Hoovervilles there are, Trumpvilles. I personally am wondering whether or not some of the Trump MAGA people who feel disillusioned with getting their RVs and their well-armed weaponry and descend on some of Trump's golf courses and squat, take them over. Or a few maybe burn them to the ground in fury. Who knows what might be happening? Oh, that'll make the emperor angry. So we have a potentially interesting few years ahead. Whether or not it will be sad and pathetic, what kind of things that Trump will be doing next year during the 250th 4th of July thing. He'll brag and pompous and have parades and that. But if our 2026 is like 1930, then things are not good. And it's going to be to the point where no matter what he blathers and what the press secretary blither blathers, way too many people will notice, no, that's not the way things really are. So we'll be seeing what happens, and you'll have media, independent media like Midas Touch and these others that are hovering around the edges. So long as the internet can stay functional, people can communicate on things. And then it'll be interesting to watch to see to what extent you start getting pushback. Theoretically, somebody like a Joe Rogan could flip all over the map because if he gets a bee in his bonnet about stuff, I don't think he'll last that long. Well, yeah, well, he could live as long as Herbert Hoover, who lived into his 90s. But what's going on up here is another kettle of fish. And so one might argue two things Trump done is unified Canada to an extent that I never thought. But well, yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, the conservatives were all set to take over after Trudeau up in Canada until Trump shot his mouth off and managed to blow that to smithereens, and the Liberals stayed in power. So good gravy. This shows you the tremendous annoyance that Trump generates in these areas. And we'll be seeing the similar kinds of things. Trump is just jonesing to have a Nobel Prize. And so he's flailing all over the place. He did that thing with Azerbaijan and that where they were selling the Armenians down the tubes, completely screwing the promises that they had made to try to protect the Armenian Christians in there. So there, ironically, you'll have the potentials for an awful lot of pro-Christian creationists to be seeing how Armenian Christians are getting the short end of the stick in this little happy agreement that was made. Not that Trump himself did it, but nevertheless, he's just acting there for the photo op. He loves his little photo ops. In the same vein, don't forget how he betrayed the Kurds. You've got all these different nationalities and ethnic groups that have been trampled and flushed down the toilet in the expediency of Trump's worldview. And I'm sure there's going to be areas involving Syria and some of these other spots that are going to be showing up similar things. It's going to be intriguing to see what happens when Putin slips over for his little visit to Alaska to have his coffee klatch with Trump. And I'm wondering, is it safe for Putin to leave Russia? You know, is he really that secure at home? Might not some of the places start doing rebellions and blowing stuff up while he's gone? So I'm assuming he's going to do the best he can to keep tight rein on things, but that it doesn't seem completely impossible that he ain't got an airport to land back in if he flies back to Russia. So who knows what the heck can go on. And then, of course, Zelensky has no intention of simply rolling over like the Munich Agreement back in 1938 of simply accepting whatever Putin has talked Trump into. So all Zelensky needs to do is to have another talk with Trump afterwards, and he can steer him back onto a different direction because he's becoming extremely manipulatable these days. That's one of the reasons why Steve Miller and other ideologues always like to have the last word with Trump to keep him bent to the direction that they want him to bend in. He was doing that for years in Trump 1.0. Miller would make a point, good God, Shermer and other Pelosi would come in there and talk Trump into all sorts of agreements on immigration reform that horrified all the xenophobes. So Miller would have to immediately pop in like a vampire out of the coffin from the next room to maneuver him back onto the dogma. So who gets to talk to him last will be the interesting little bit. So moving away from USA as a reliable trade partner, that's another really important, long-lasting issue. One of the terrible ironies, I've noticed this for years and years and years, is that the United States is only a part of the world, and the world is figuring out how to do industry, and they're figuring out how to make advanced weapon systems, and they're bigging all sorts of things. India has a huge amount of poor people, but they have a middle class that lives a middle class, what we would call suburban lifestyle. There are 350 million of them in India. In other words, a population as big as the entire population of the United States, all living in a middle class lifestyle. They've got just as many incredibly poor people and a veneer of extremely rich people on top as well. But that means the world's much more complicated than it was. And that so long as we were calling the shots and paying a lot of the bills in NATO and alliances and all the rest, then there was a natural tendency for the nations to go, well, okay, I'm happy not to pay my fair share, and we won't pay quite as much defense, and we'll defer to you, and you can decide the things, and we'll buy your weapon systems and all that. Well, idiot Trump doesn't realize that by forcing everybody, browbeating everybody to pay their own way and to not take advantage of us by having trade deficits or whatever, that it means that they will maybe not need us at all. They won't want to buy our weapon systems because we are unreliable. Some future Trump could flip on the off switch and our things would be embargoed. So maybe we should stay in-house. And the European Union, being 450 million people in a free trade zone, and if they even make free trade agreements, even if Britain doesn't re-enter the European Union, nonetheless, they can still have free trade networks through these various nations in the Commonwealth, to where that's a big block. And even if their economy was not nearly as sufficient, yes, the world is moving towards China. Well, and China is doing tons to inveigle themselves in their vast desire to become the world power. They figure they got 1 billion people and they're cleverer than everybody. And they've been browbeaten for centuries, and now they're going to flex their muscles. Now, the Chinese are also their own worst enemy. They're the new imperialists. So their Belt and Road program that's glomming on to networks and invigilating their control systems and producing ports that are siphoning off resources to China and all of that is also producing a huge amount of inequality and resentment over the Chinese overlords. So they're the new British East India Company, frankly, and they're likely to have just as bad a reputation as the British East India Company the more they stick their nose in stuff. Well, they're not going to stop doing that no matter what Donald Trump wants to do behind his little Fortress America wall. And they're going ahead with renewable energy, with electric cars. In fact, they just made some deals to start selling their electric cars, which are way underpriced compared to Tesla and some of these other product lines, and that they can do the old Rockefeller approach of arbitrarily undercutting your opponent's prices to drive them out of business so that you have a monopoly. That worked for market capitalist oligarchs back in the 19th century. Why shouldn't it work for communist capitalist oligarchs in the 21st century? They've learned a lot, but they can also be insufferable and blow off their own foot in the same way that a lot of the attitudes of the Sung and the Ming dynasty did to marginalize China in the world, and they can pull that off again. So we'll see what happens. But it'll be a tough catch-up play, which we'll do a lot of, but the America in 2085 may not be anywhere near as significant on as many fields as we are. And of course, education and medical technology and a lot of primary source research things, a lot of the technologies that are developed take generations to play out. And if you're undercutting fundamental research as the numbskulls in Trump 2.0 are, this is just screwing things up over the next decades to come. Now, I do not anticipate being around in 2085, although wouldn't it be interesting if I was? But I may make it to 2055, and we'll see where things are on that front. I'd be a little over 100 years old at that stage. Mark Carney promised to increase military spending by 4 times. Yeah, and you've got really significant developments in the Sweden aerospace industry and a lot of the people involved in the European Union. And this is one of the big experiments that we'll be interested to see if we do, in fact, have a U.S. stock market crash and a depression. Is it possible that the interconnected systems in these other cultures are such that they don't tank in the way their 1930s counterparts did? Europe was a bunch of browbeating independent countries with terrible economic policies at almost every turn, and the American Depression swept over and obliterated and turned into a global depression. Well, the European Union is not perfect, but nonetheless, it only needs to be significantly less imperfect than the 1930s European arrangement for it to maybe weather things pretty well. And we have a different mechanisms. We have faster communications. There's a whole bunch of interesting things going on. And whether I think to some extent, a lot of the moves that we're making to renewable energy are going to happen whether Trump likes them or not. Are any of the American car industry going to pretend that the rest of the world is not going electric and decide they're not going to make any competitive products that they can sell abroad because the United States market isn't that big? Will Buick want to stop selling cars in China? They were quite a significant brand name there, and their electric Buicks should fall into the same electric Cadillacs, the Lyric, and all that. Or would you want to make the thing where they're to be told they can't sell over there, that they shouldn't try to compete? Wow. Well, let's just follow the guidance of Mr. Trump, who is a business bankrupt and has never made a damn product in his entire life successfully, and bankrupted gambling casinos to call the shots on what companies are supposed to do. Oh, this is pathetic. So anyway, that's an exciting little world we got on, where we've slogged along all the way pretty good to almost an hour up. Let me put my little advert for Rocks for Their book. Come on. Pull up, thing. Maybe my little electrons are tired. Whoops. And then get my screen share going. I do not like the non-mouse approach. One of these days I got to buy a new mouse, but we'll worry about that later. And put you over there, and away we go. Here's wonderful little commercial. We will probably have a new one for Rocks for There too when we get all that done. One thing at a time, kids. One thing at a time. I must say, as a writer, bye, Lisa, that I feel that in my pathetic age of 73 here, I have more fun, I am more productive, I am more intellectually challenged and entertaining to my daily life, even though I'm not making money in the way that Peter Thiel and those other scuzzbuckets in the Trump oligarchy are doing it. But nonetheless, am I fulfilled and creative and pleased and not ashamed of what I'm outputting day by day, month by month, year by year? I am entirely proud of what I'm doing. And those, I think, who I bump into that have respect for me, from Dan Stern Cardinale and Erica and Paulogia and Dapper Dino and all the other rest of people who have become familiar with the things that we do here, even though we're kind of on the low end of the totem pole. Nonetheless, we are producing interesting things and part of that great gospel of methodology. And more people are gradually adopting that technique of source fact checking stuff. I was just watching a Logic video where he was going after a Christian apologist who was repeating tropes about atheist deathbed confessions. And it turns out, Dreammaker or whatever, I have to put down the moniker he goes under. But anyway, another analyst had actually already done a video on a different Christian apologist who had made very, very similar kinds of little claims previously. And so both of them are doing full out source methods analysis, where they're tracking down, even though the person doesn't actually give the source material correctly, they're tracking down what the stuff is and what the actual facts are, and providing links to the material so that people can follow up on their own. That is source method stuff, kids. And it's a game that Tortukans and dumb people cannot play. And the more we play that game and encourage people to play that game, and to encourage reporters and investigative people who might to the fact-checking level, but not to the source methods full out analysis. The more that they do that bit, I think the better off we will be. And we can gradually reform things where it becomes the norm that politicians have to supply sources for their claims, they have to defend their methodology, and that the kind of blither blather numbskullery that goes on in political defense becomes unacceptable in the later part of this century. And that means that will give us an insulative mechanism, because it's much harder, not impossible, but much harder to get your head up your ass wrong if you have a understructure of sound method than if you operate on that bad methods approach that we are seeing in all too spectacular a disaster in Trump 2.0 and in the anti-vax movement and in the political environment in so many different places, Putin and other dictators, where information distortion is essential in that world. And it is bad dog in a source methods approach. So everybody take care. Watch out for whatever circumstances you have for heat and floods and tornadoes and all the other claptrap that's going on, plus people that are connected up that are might be bombed in Ukraine and all these other places. And we will see you kids next week. And in another 2 weeks, we'll have another surprise, no surprises, Luskin report on as we plow our way through their stupid little list. My gosh, it's delightful. Why did they go to all the trouble of building this idiotic list that it doesn't actually make they want to? But anyway, okay, everybody stay safe. We will see you kids next time, and